Yesterday, the Toronto Blue Jays sent down Alek Manoah to the minor leagues for the second time this season. And who could have saw that coming? Because going into the year, he was expected to be the co-ace of this pitching staff alongside Kevin Gausman, and he finished third in Cy Young voting. This should not be happening for a guy who was that close to winning the most illustrious award for a pitcher. So we'll break down the real reason and much more as to why he got sent down on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And some more unfortunate news for the Toronto Blue Jays. They've been hit with the injury bug lately. The offense is not getting any better. And now Alek Manoah has been sent down to the minor leagues for the second time this season. Now, Nick, we could not have seen this coming going into the year. We were expecting some regression. Some advanced analytics websites were predicting him to have a mid-fours ERA, and we were calling them crazy. We were saying we would do outrageous things if Alek Manoah were to finish the year with an ERA of 4.5 or higher. And it's looking like we're going to have to go ahead and do those outrageous things because he currently sits at about a 5.75. His command is all over the place. His velocity is way down, and he does not look like the same pitcher at all that almost won the Cy Young last season.
Yeah, he had a very, very rough season. He came back from his demotion to the Florida Complex League and looked okay and is pretty good in his first start. And then ever since then has kind of been on a downcline, as most recent as the Guardians game, which may have, put the grave for him maybe until September. But before we do get in the video, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 8,000 subscribers. Peter, there's a real reason behind why they did send Manoah down. And of course, one of the main reasons is his performance, which has been absolutely lackluster since his Cy Young year last year. And looking at these numbers while getting him ready for the video, it made me a little bit sad. His rookie year, dominant. His year last year, beyond dominant. Just one of the best pitchers in baseball. Tons of innings, 196 innings. And then this year, something is changed. He's not in shape. His fastball velocity is down 20%. Peter, disappointing is an understatement. And can we imagine if Alek Manoah would have been a semblance of himself this year, how dominant our pitching staff would have been, considering the fact that it's the best in baseball, as is, gosh, that Yusei Kikuchi is up here, doing Alek Manoah numbers, which is very, very shocking. But I'm happy with the rotation, but this Manoah thing is just very, very sad, and there is a real reason behind it.
Yeah, it's like an evil cycle for Toronto Blue Jays pitchers. Last year, they got great performances out of Kevin Gausman, Alek Manoah, and even Ross Stripling, and then Jose Barrios turned into the worst starting pitcher in baseball. Now this year, the tides have shifted. Jose Barrios has gone back to his old self. His contract now looks serviceable again. It looks like it was a great deal by the Toronto Blue Jays. And now Alek Manoah has turned into one of the worst qualified starters in all of baseball. Now, I think the real reason as to why he's getting sent down here is because the Blue Jays shifted to a six-man rotation because they had 17 games in 17 days, and they needed some arms to cover that. They needed extra starting pitching. They needed guys to step up and eat some of those innings. And they went ahead and did that. Now, in the next week that they're playing, they have 3 off days. In the next week and a half, I should say, they have 3 off days coming up. So a 6-man rotation is not needed. Now, we touched on it in yesterday's video, Nick. The logical thing would have been to send either Alek Manoah or Hyun-Jin Ryu to the bullpen and be the long man out of there. That would have made the most sense. But instead, they called up Hagen Danner, who has electric stuff. He made his major league debut yesterday. And hopefully he can offer some sort of relief to that bullpen because they have been taxed quite a bit. But I guess the Jays saw enough in Hyun-Jin Ryu to have him as a serviceable 5th starter, a guy who's going to give you a chance to win every 5th day. And they didn't see enough out of Alek Manoah to keep him in the major leagues because they're in the middle of a pennant race right now. They don't have the tiebreaker over the Seattle Mariners, and they're only a game and a half ahead of them. So you can't go ahead and throw away games every 5th day or every 6th day. So the Jays need him to figure things out because he is a big part of this team going forward, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, and clearly they have more faith in Hagen Danner than they do Alek Manoah is kind of what, this is saying. And like you said, these off days are, a big part of the reason alongside his performance. And we do expect that Manoah will be back in September at some point. But there's also a chance, that he doesn't come back and that he just works the year through the minors like we thought he was going to when he originally got sent down before getting called up evidently, too early because he is not able to, he hasn't been performing well at all. And when looking at his stats this year, and I compared it to the previous 2 years, like I said, his fastball velocity was in the 52 to 53 percentiles first 2 years, and his advanced metrics are really bad, and it's just not getting better. He needs to just get a completely fresh slate, maybe even next year, get in shape as well, and just go back to the dominant pitcher that, he was. And we're recording this video, on a Friday, so Hagen Danner is probably making his debut, like you said. And, maybe it'll work out that Hagen Danner is going to be that guy who, replaces Alek Manoah, what he could have done in the bullpen. But maybe a part of it as well is that, Hyun-Jin Ryu and Alek Manoah, although they could have been bullpen options, as, bad as it says to, think about this, Manoah doesn't really have super electric stuff this year because of how bad his slider has been. And it's been okay at times, but maybe if it was a Yusei Kikuchi who was struggling, they could throw him to the pen since at least he has a high-velocity fastball. But they're trying to win right now, and they got Hagen Danner up, who has a high-velocity fastball, and I think it helped them more in the pen than Alek Manoah. But, the six-man rotation is a thing of the past. Interesting to see how they manage the rotation going forward now that they're down to 5, and they might stick with 5. Depending on how Hyun-Jin Ryu does in the starting rotation box, if he starts to struggle, then who knows? Maybe they'll start to, call up Manoah again and go through this crazy cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was it. Once they called him up the first time, I thought he was going to be staying up for the rest of the season. The Blue Jays made their decision. They thought he was ready to come back and contribute. Clearly not the case. I thought they rushed him back to the big leagues, and that was evident because he was struggling. His command was still not any better. His slider was not moving any more than it was beforehand, and his velocity was relatively the same. So it doesn't make sense why they rushed him back in the first place. I guess they had to out of necessity. They couldn't keep having bullpen days every 5th day, but Ross Atkins knew this was a possibility at the deadline, and he maybe should have went out there and got some relief. It didn't have to be Michael Lorenzen, who threw a no-hitter the other day. It could have been someone like Chris Flexen, who was DFA'd. It could have been someone else, another depth starter, to help and facilitate this starting rotation that has pitched their butts off all season long. And Alek Manoah, if he was right, if he was the Alek Manoah of 2022, then this would be not only the best rotation in baseball by a mile, it might have been the best rotation of all time, one of the best rotations of all time. And they've been that good all season long. Everyone has been pulling their weight, and then Alek Manoah just nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and it's just very, very unfortunate. It also goes to show that I've kind of been beating this drum for a while. The lack of minor league depth that is a lot due in part of Ross Atkins not, being able to have any minor league depth. It didn't sign any guys, but also just, the guys down there not performing. Zach Thompson, Trent Thornton was picked up by the Seattle Mariners. It's just been a very, very, rough year for Alek Manoah. And it's made it very, very different, for the Jays pitching staff. Because as good as it's been the best in baseball. We've been rotating between a 4-man starter, a 5-man starter, and a 6-man rotation for the past, couple weeks there. And it's been working. It's just that every time Manoah would come up, you'd, worry a little bit. And who knows if the Jays were thinking about this before the Guardians start. I would think that they were definitely leaning towards this, obviously because of the reason we discussed with the off days. But struggling against the Guardians and walking as many as he did when you're playing an offense that is that bad was it for Alek Manoah. And I'm sure he's not happy about the demotion, but hopefully he can use it as some motivation going forward. Because he needs to get himself back to what even 50% of what he was last year.
Yeah. I think he will get back to some sort of semblance of that, and I think it's not crazy to say that Alek Manoah got complacent with his success, and he was okay with being third in Cy Young voting, because who wouldn't? That's a great season. That's a career year for most guys that step onto a big league field. So he needs to get back to that. I think he can get back to that. He's just got to take his off season a little bit more seriously, because I'm sure he had a lot of fun. A lot of people wanted to see him. A lot of people that hadn't seen him in a long time coming out of the woodworks. You never know what goes on in someone's personal life, so you don't want to speculate on that front. But he's got to get back to what made him successful, and the Blue Jays need him to get back to that, because he's cost himself a lot of money this season. And we were talking about him being the first guy to get an extension out of the big three, Vladdy, Bo, and Manoah. And now that's totally an afterthought. I don't even want to think about giving Alek Manoah another penny before he figures out his performances.
And also, just kind of hidden in this conversation, which might be a future video for the offseason, Vladdy as well hasn't played himself into, a great contract. Obviously, he's probably still going to get a massive contract, but he hasn't helped himself out too much this year. But that'll wrap up the video. Let us know what your thoughts are on the Manoah demotion and when you think he'll come back Thank you guys for watching, and hopefully the Jays can win this afternoon.
Thanks.